2 lovers dead, 1 woman scorned, and a detective racing against time. But who really killed Ryan Matthews and Sophia Carter? The truth is more twisted than anyone could ever imagine. Want to uncover the shocking secrets behind this twisted crime? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications for the next chapter in this chilling investigation. The cabin stood in eerie silence, nestled deep in the Pennsylvania woods. The moon cast long shadows through the towering pine trees, its silver glow reflecting off the still waters of Lake Harmony. It was the perfect hideaway, secluded, peaceful. A place meant for stolen moments, whispered confessions, and passion away from prying eyes. But tonight, it was a crime scene. Detective Mark Caldwell stepped out of his car, the crunch of gravel under his boots breaking the stillness. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers illuminated the outline of the log cabin, its rustic charm now tainted with the unmistakable stench of death. Double homicide, Officer Jenny Torres reported as she approached him, her face pale in the dim light. Ryan Matthews and Sophia Carter, both deceased. It's brutal, sir. Caldwell exhaled sharply. He had been in homicide for nearly 2 decades, seen enough death to make most men numb. But something in Torres' tone made his stomach tighten. "Show me," he said. They entered the cabin, and the crime scene hit Caldwell like a punch to the gut. The bedroom was a slaughterhouse. Blood streaked the walls, pooling around the bodies sprawled across the floor. The first victim, Ryan Matthews, 41, was slumped over the bed. His throat slit so deeply it nearly severed his head from his body. His once handsome face was frozen in terror. The second victim, Sophia Carter, 36, lay near the doorway, multiple stab wounds riddling her chest and stomach. A pool of blood had spread beneath her, soaking into the expensive Persian rug. On the nightstand, a single piece of paper lay stained with blood. The words were scrawled in hurried, almost desperate handwriting. "You broke my heart. Now I break yours." Caldwell picked up the note with gloved hands, reading it twice. "This wasn't random," he muttered. "This was personal." Torres shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else." Sophia's phone was found in her hand. "We checked the last messages." She handed Caldwell the phone. The screen still lit up. The most recent messages were all from one sender, Claire Matthews. Caldwell's brow furrowed. Claire Matthews, Ryan's ex-wife. They had been married for 10 years before their messy divorce 6 months ago. Rumors had circulated that Claire had never moved on, that she had taken the split hard. Now, it looked like those rumors were more than just gossip. He scrolled through the messages. Claire, 8:32 p.m. "You think you can walk away that easily? You have no idea what's coming." Claire, 9:45 p.m. "I warned you, Ryan, but you never listened." Claire, 11:20 p.m. "Enjoy your last night together." The last message had been sent just minutes before the estimated time of death. Caldwell turned to Torres. "Where is she?" "We sent a patrol unit to her house. No sign of her yet." Caldwell's gut told him Claire Matthews wasn't on the run, at least not yet. She had planned this, executed it with cold precision, and now she was watching, waiting. "Find her," he ordered, "before she decides she's not finished." Torres nodded and moved to relay the order, but Caldwell's instincts nagged at him. Claire Matthews, for all her bitterness and anger, didn't strike him as the type who would resort to murder. She was smart, calculating even, but not violent. As he stood there, staring at the blood-soaked room, Caldwell's mind raced. Something wasn't right. Claire's messages, while incriminating, were almost too on the nose. She seemed too eager to make herself the obvious suspect. No, this felt like a smokescreen, a carefully orchestrated plan to set her up as the villain. Then a thought struck him. Vanessa Green. Vanessa had been Ryan's other woman, the one he had secretly been seeing behind Claire's back. Their affair had been a well-kept secret until recently, when whispers had surfaced about Ryan possibly trying to break things off with her. If Vanessa had been afraid of being discarded, of being left alone again after all this time, then the fear of losing Ryan could have driven her to this. It was clear now. The timing, the brutality of the murders, the anger, it all pointed to Vanessa. She had the motive, and perhaps more importantly, the desperation. While Claire had been focused on revenge, Vanessa had been consumed by fear and jealousy. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Ryan to another woman, especially not after everything she had sacrificed for him. "Torres!" Caldwell called, his voice sharp. "Forget Claire for a minute. Focus on Vanessa Green. I want a full background check. She was Ryan's mistress, and now she's nowhere to be found. I'm betting she's our killer." Torres paused, clearly surprised by the shift in direction. "Vanessa? You think she's the one behind this?" Caldwell's eyes narrowed as he looked at the scene before him. "I don't think I know." Back at the police station, Caldwell and his team dug into Vanessa's past. What they found wasn't pretty. Ryan had promised her a future, a life without the lies, but he had started pulling away. Vanessa feared being replaced by someone else, and Sophia, Ryan's new love, had become the perfect target. Vanessa couldn't handle the thought of losing Ryan to a younger woman, someone who could offer him what she couldn't. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Vanessa had been spiraling for weeks, unable to accept that Ryan was moving on. The final straw was when she found out he was with Sophia on that fateful night. She couldn't let it go. She couldn't stand the thought of being alone again, abandoned. And in a blind fit of rage, she decided to do what she had to do to keep him close forever. The hours ticked by as Caldwell worked through the evidence, but he knew one thing for sure: Vanessa was out there hiding in plain sight, and she wasn't finished yet. Claire Matthews sat in her dimly lit living room, staring at the glass of whiskey in her hand. The ice had melted, leaving a watered-down amber pool at the bottom. She barely noticed the vibration of her phone on the coffee table. The news was everywhere now. Ryan Matthews and his mistress, Sophia Carter, found murdered in a remote cabin. Claire exhaled shakily. She should have felt something. Relief, maybe even satisfaction. But instead, she felt a strange emptiness. She had hated Ryan for what he did to her, but she never wanted him dead. A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Claire Matthews, it's the police. Open up." She hesitated. "They think I did it." She had been expecting this. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, adjusted her oversized sweater, and opened the door. Detective Mark Caldwell stood there, his sharp gray eyes scanning her face. Next to him, Officer Jenny Torres held a notepad, her pen ready. "Ms. Matthews, we'd like to ask you a few questions about your ex-husband," Caldwell said, his tone calm but firm. Claire folded her arms. "I heard about Ryan. It's all over the news, but I don't know how I can help." Caldwell's stare didn't waver. "Where were you last night between 8 p.m. and midnight?" Claire let out a slow breath. "This is it." "I was here alone," she answered. "No visitors?" She shook her head. Number I spent the night drinking and watching old movies. Caldwell glanced at Torres. No alibi. Do you own a vehicle? Yes, my SUV is parked in the garage. Mind if we take a look at it? Claire's heartbeat quickened. Why? Do you think I drove out to that cabin and killed them? Caldwell didn't flinch. We're just covering all possibilities. Claire hesitated. If I refuse, it'll make me look guilty. She exhaled and stepped aside. Go ahead. As Torres walked past her toward the garage, Claire caught Caldwell's gaze. He doesn't believe me. She wanted to scream, to tell them she didn't do it. But she knew better. Right now, she was the perfect suspect. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, at the remote cabin, forensic teams combed through the scene. An officer pulled up a set of tire tracks leading away from the property. Another found a strand of long blonde hair on Sophia Carter's bedsheets. Then, the big discovery came. A knife, wiped clean, but not clean enough. The forensic lid carefully lifted a faint fingerprint from the handle. When they ran it through the system, the match was shocking. It wasn't Claire Matthews. It belonged to Vanessa Green. Who is Vanessa Green? Detective Caldwell's eyes narrowed when the name popped up on the report. Vanessa Green, 38, was a former colleague of Ryan's, a woman who had been rumored to be involved with him even before his marriage to Claire fell apart. Unlike Sophia, Vanessa hadn't just been a fling. She had believed she was the next Mrs. Matthews. But when Ryan's divorce was finalized, he hadn't chosen Vanessa. He had moved on to Sophia Carter instead. The real killer wasn't Claire, but another woman scorned. Claire Matthews was innocent, but somewhere out there, Vanessa Green had blood on her hands, and Caldwell was going to find her. Detective Mark Caldwell sat at his desk, staring at the forensic report. The name Vanessa Green glared back at him in bold print. He tapped his pen against the desk, thinking. Claire Matthews had been a convenient suspect, the bitter ex-wife, the woman with a motive. But the evidence told a different story. The partial fingerprint on the knife, the tire tracks leading away from the cabin, they all pointed to Vanessa. But why? Vanessa wasn't Ryan's latest conquest. She wasn't the woman he had left Claire for. That was Sophia Carter. Yet, Sophia had been murdered too. A visit to Vanessa Green Caldwell, and Officer Jenny Torres pulled up in front of Vanessa Green's suburban home just after noon. It was a modest house, painted beige, with neatly trimmed hedges lining the walkway. Too perfect, too controlled. Caldwell knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it swung open. Vanessa stood there looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her blonde hair was in a messy bun, and dark circles sat under her eyes. When she saw Caldwell's badge, she blinked, as if expecting this moment but still dreading it. "Detective," she said, her voice tight. "We need to ask you a few questions," Caldwell replied, watching her closely. "It's about Ryan Matthews." Vanessa's fingers tightened around the edge of the door, her knuckles going white. "Of course. Come in." The house was immaculate, not a single thing out of place. It smelled faintly of lavender and bleach, a scent Caldwell had learned to associate with guilt. Torres flipped open her notepad as they sat across from Vanessa in the living room. "Ms. Green, when was the last time you spoke to Ryan Matthews?" Vanessa licked her lips, glancing toward the window. A few weeks ago. Maybe longer." Caldwell leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure about that?" She hesitated, just for a second, but Caldwell caught it. "What exactly was your relationship with Mr. Matthews?" he asked. Vanessa let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "What does it matter now? He's dead." "That's exactly why it matters," Caldwell said, his voice steady. "You were close to him, weren't you?" Vanessa looked away. "At one point, a long time ago." "But you still cared about him," Torres pressed. "Even after he left his wife, even after he moved on to Sophia Carter." Something in Vanessa's face twitched at Sophia's name. Bingo. Caldwell let the silence stretch. People always talked when they were uncomfortable, and Vanessa was cracking. The truth begins to unravel. Vanessa exhaled sharply. "Look, Ryan and we were serious, or at least I thought we were." "But he didn't choose you," Caldwell said. "He chose Sophia." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Yes." Torres scribbled something in her notepad. "And that upset you?" Vanessa let out a short, bitter laugh. "Wouldn't it upset you, detective? Being led on for years, being promised a future, only to be tossed aside like you were nothing?" Caldwell watched her carefully. "You must have felt betrayed." Vanessa's eyes snapped to his, and for the first time they burned with something raw and dangerous. "Yes," she whispered, "I did." Caldwell leaned back. "Where were you the night Ryan and Sophia were murdered?" Vanessa's body went rigid. I was at home," she said quickly. "Alone?" Another alibi with no witnesses. Caldwell studied her. She was lying. He knew it. She knew it. And now he had to prove it. Meanwhile, back at the station, the forensic team had been working non-stop, running checks on Vanessa's financial records, phone calls, and security footage from the roads leading to the cabin. Then, a breakthrough. A traffic camera had caught Vanessa's car leaving the city the night of the murders. Destination? The road leading to the cabin. Vanessa Green was no longer just a suspect. She was the prime suspect. Caldwell closed the case file and stood up. It was time to bring Vanessa in for real, and this time she wouldn't be walking away. Detective Mark Caldwell sat at his desk, tapping his pen against Vanessa Green's case file. The evidence was stacking up against her. The traffic camera footage showed her car heading toward the cabin the night of the murders. The forensic team had pulled a partial fingerprint from the knife used in the killings, and it was hers. Yet there were still unanswered questions. Why kill both Ryan and Sophia? If this was about revenge, why not just kill Ryan? Why did Sophia have to die too? And more importantly, was Vanessa the type to commit murder? Caldwell didn't believe in assumptions. People killed for all sorts of reasons: love, betrayal, jealousy, desperation. Vanessa had motive. She had opportunity. And now she had no alibi. It was time to bring her in. The arrest, Vanessa Green answered the door in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, her blonde hair in a messy bun. She didn't look surprised to see Caldwell and Officer Jenny Torres standing on her porch. "I was expecting you," she said flatly. Caldwell didn't respond. He held up a warrant. "Vanessa Green, you're under arrest for the murders of Ryan Matthews and Sophia Carter." She exhaled sharply, her lips pressing into a thin line. "So, this is it?" Torres stepped forward. "Turn around, please." Vanessa obeyed. The metallic click of handcuffs locking into place filled the quiet suburban street. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Caldwell's eyebrows lifted. "Didn't mean to what, Vanessa?" She shook her head, staring at the ground as Torres read her rights. She wasn't talking. Not yet. But Caldwell knew she would. She had already started. The interrogations. Sitting in the interrogation room, Vanessa stared at the table, her wrists cuffed in front of her. "So I drove out there," she admitted. "I just wanted him to see me, to acknowledge what he did to me." Torres tapped her pen against the table. "And then what?" Vanessa hesitated. This was it, the moment of truth. She closed her eyes. "I saw them together, through the cabin window. He was laughing with her, holding her, the same way he used to hold me." Her fingers clenched into fists. "I lost it. I knocked on the door. He was annoyed when he saw me, but Sophia, she just looked confused." Vanessa swallowed hard. "I told him we needed to talk. He said there was nothing to talk about." Caldwell nodded. He could picture it. A scorned woman, fueled by betrayal and heartbreak. A man who had used her and discarded her. An emotional explosion waiting to happen. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't even remember grabbing the knife." Torres tensed. "But you did." Vanessa let out a shuddering breath. "Ryan tried to push me out the door. I snapped. I swung the knife. I didn't even think. And then he just..." Her voice cracked. "There was blood. So much blood." She covered her face with her hands, breathing heavily. Caldwell's voice was steady. "What about Sophia?" Vanessa shook her head, tears streaking her face. She screamed. She tried to run. I panicked. I couldn't let her leave. I couldn't let her tell anyone. It all happened so fast." Torres closed the case file. That was it. The confession. Vanessa had been blinded by jealousy. She thought she had been Ryan's next choice, only to realize she had never been more than an option. And in that moment of rage, she made sure he had no more choices left. The final piece of the puzzle. As Caldwell walked out of the interrogation room, he spotted Claire Matthews sitting in the waiting area, her face pale. "She confessed," he said simply. Claire swallowed hard. I thought it was me they were going to blame." Caldwell nodded. "It's always the obvious suspect at first, but killers slip up, and Vanessa did." Claire looked down, a mix of emotions flashing across her face. She was just another woman he lied to. Caldwell studied her. "Did you still love him?" Claire let out a small, sad smile. "I don't know, but I do know one thing." She met Caldwell's gaze. "I never wanted him dead." Detective Mark Caldwell watched through the two-way mirror as Vanessa Green sat slumped in the interrogation room, her head in her hands. The weight of her confession had settled on her shoulders like a crushing burden. She had killed Ryan Matthews in a fit of rage, a woman scorned, discarded, replaced. And Sophia Carter had just been unlucky enough to be there. Vanessa had said all the right words. She hadn't planned to kill him. She had only wanted closure, but closure had turned into murder. And now there was no going back. Finalizing the case, Caldwell took a deep breath before stepping out of the observation room and back into the small, dimly lit space where Vanessa sat. Officer Jenny Torres followed, carrying the case file. Vanessa barely lifted her head as Caldwell sat down across from her. "You confessed?" he said simply. She nodded, her fingers trembling slightly. "That means we move forward with charges," Torres added. "First-degree murder for Ryan Matthews, second-degree murder for Sophia Carter." Vanessa flinched at the words. "I didn't mean to kill her." Caldwell didn't blink. "But you did." Silence stretched between them. "Do you regret it?" Torres finally asked. Vanessa let out a bitter laugh. "What do you think?" Caldwell studied her, his gut instinct kicking in. Something wasn't right. Vanessa was guilty. There was no doubt about that. But something about her demeanor made him uneasy. She had confessed, but the way she spoke, there was still a piece missing. Torres, oblivious to Caldwell's unease, slid a document toward Vanessa. "We'll be formally booking you now." Vanessa stared at it for a long moment before finally looking up, and when she did, Caldwell knew she wasn't telling them the whole truth. Claire Matthews, the silent witness. Outside the interrogation room, Claire Matthews sat in the waiting area, her hands gripping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She was free. She was no longer a suspect, but something about it didn't sit right with her. Her ex-husband was dead. The man who had cheated, lied, manipulated, and the woman he had left her for, Sophia, was dead too. Claire had imagined this moment 1,000 times in her head. What would it feel like if Ryan just disappeared? Would she be relieved? Would she feel justice had been served? Now that it had actually happened, she just felt empty. Detective Caldwell walked over and sat beside her. "She confessed," he said. Claire exhaled slowly. "So, it was her?" Caldwell nodded. "She thought she was next after you, that she was the one he'd truly settled down with. And when she realized he had already moved on to someone else," she snapped. Claire took a slow sip of coffee, her hand still shaking slightly. "You knew about her, didn't you?" Caldwell asked. Claire let out a small, humorless laugh. Every woman in Ryan's life knew about the others. He thought he was so good at hiding it, but he wasn't. Caldwell studied her. "You don't seem surprised." Claire turned to face him. For the first time, her eyes were cold. "I'm not," she said simply. Caldwell frowned. "What do you mean?" She gave him a small, knowing smile. Ryan spent his life breaking hearts. Eventually, someone was going to break his. Caldwell didn't respond, because for the first time, he wasn't sure if Claire had truly been innocent. The missing piece of the puzzle hours later, as Caldwell reviewed the final case report, something kept nagging at him. Vanessa had confessed, but why did it feel like Claire knew more than she was letting on? Maybe she hadn't pulled the trigger, or in this case, the knife. But something in the way she had spoken, the calm in her voice. Had she pushed Vanessa toward this? Had she planted the seed? Had she known exactly what would happen when she told Vanessa about Sophia? Caldwell closed the case file, exhaling sharply. Some crimes were committed with weapons, others were committed with words, and sometimes the person who got away with it wasn't the one who held the knife. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, family members, former colleagues, everyone wanted to witness the trial of Vanessa Green. It wasn't just about the murder of Ryan Matthews and Sophia Carter. It was about betrayal, heartbreak, and revenge. A crime driven by passion and years of deception. Vanessa sat at the defense table, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She wasn't the woman she had been a few weeks ago. She was no longer Ryan's hopeful lover. She was now the woman on trial for murder. The prosecution's case. The district attorney, Benjamin Holloway, wasted no time painting Vanessa as a woman consumed by jealousy. She was used and discarded by Ryan Matthews, Holloway told the jury, and when she saw him with another woman, not his wife but yet another lover, she snapped. He presented the traffic camera footage placing Vanessa near the cabin. The fingerprint on the murder weapon, her confession. Ryan Matthews' past does not absolve the defendant of her actions, Holloway said firmly. She had a choice that night, and she chose murder. Vanessa kept her head down. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She knew the evidence was against her. The defense's strategy. Vanessa's lawyer, David Carlson took a different approach. Yes, Vanessa Green was at the cabin that night, he admitted, but she wasn't a cold-blooded killer. He played recordings of Ryan's manipulative messages, the sweet nothings he whispered to Vanessa even while divorcing Claire. He lied to her, Carlson said. He made her believe she was next. He strung her along for years. He emphasized Vanessa's emotional state, how she had gone to the cabin not to kill, but to confront the man who had played her like a fool. Ryan Matthews was not an innocent man, he argued, and Vanessa was pushed to the edge by his deceit. It was a risky defense. They weren't denying the murder. They were trying to humanize it. A witness no one expected. Then Claire Matthews took the stand. Ryan's ex-wife. The woman who had been replaced before Vanessa was even in the picture. She sat tall, her expression unreadable. Carlson approached. Mrs. Matthews, did Ryan have a history of lying to women? Claire tilted her head. Does the sun rise in the east? A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the courtroom. Carlson continued. Would you say Vanessa was just one of many? Claire's lips curled slightly. I would say Vanessa was just the last one. Carlson nodded. And you? Did you ever wish for revenge? Silence. The room hung on Claire's answer. Then she smiled. Ryan was a man who made enemies. But I never needed revenge. She glanced at Vanessa. Because eventually, men like him destroy themselves. The prosecutor's cross-examination Holloway wasn't about to let Claire rewrite the narrative. You had no involvement in this crime, Mrs. Matthews? He asked. Claire met his gaze, unflinching. None. No conversations with Vanessa about Ryan's new relationship? Claire smirked. If I discussed every woman Ryan cheated with, I wouldn't have time for anything else. More laughter. Holloway pressed on. Did you ever suggest to Vanessa that she'd do something about it? Claire's expression darkened. I didn't have to. Ryan was an expert at breaking women. Vanessa just happened to be the one who couldn't take it anymore. Her words sent a chill through the courtroom. Was she just stating a fact? Or was she subtly confessing that she had pushed Vanessa toward that night? The verdict approaches. As the trial neared its end, Caldwell watched Claire carefully. She was walking free. She had played the ex-wife role perfectly. The woman scorned, but not bitter. Honest, but not incriminating. Yet Caldwell couldn't shake the feeling that she was more involved than anyone knew. Vanessa would pay the price. But had Claire really escaped untouched? The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back into their seats. 12 people held Vanessa Green's fate in their hands. Detective Mark Caldwell leaned forward, hands clasped. He already knew what the verdict would be. The evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa's confession, her fingerprints, her presence at the cabin. But what haunted him was the person walking free. Claire Matthews sat in the gallery, back straight, face calm. She had played the grieving ex-wife role to perfection. No one would ever suspect her of anything more than being the woman Ryan had betrayed first. Yet Caldwell couldn't shake the feeling that she had set everything in motion. The judge turned to the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. A pause. Then, we find the defendant, Vanessa Green, guilty of second-degree murder. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Not first degree, not premeditated. It was the best outcome Vanessa could have hoped for. Vanessa didn't cry, didn't react. The judge's voice was firm. The defendant will be remanded into custody pending sentencing. Vanessa turned to look at Claire. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, and then the bailiff led her away. Caldwell's final investigation. The case was closed. The press ran their headlines. Scorned woman sentenced for murder. Love triangle ends in bloodshed. But Detective Caldwell wasn't satisfied. Something about Claire's demeanor during the trial had stayed with him. How effortlessly she had testified, how carefully she had chosen her words. Ryan had cheated on her, humiliated her, replaced her, and yet she had sat through this entire trial like a woman watching a script she had written unfold. So Caldwell did what he did best. He kept digging. Claire's carefully hidden tracks. Claire had an alibi for the night of the murder. She had been out of town. Phone records, credit card transactions, it all checked out. But something felt too perfect. When he re-examined phone records, he found something odd. Claire had called Vanessa several times in the week leading up to the murder, and then, on the day of Ryan's death, a call lasting 18 minutes. The call that changed everything. Caldwell requested a copy of the jailhouse phone calls between Claire and Vanessa after the trial. He listened to the recording, static crackling as Vanessa's voice came through. "You got what you wanted. He's gone." Claire's voice was soft, almost amused. "You think I wanted this?" A bitter laugh from Vanessa. "Don't play dumb, Claire. You knew what would happen when you told me about Sophia. You knew what I'd do." Silence. Then Claire's voice, smooth as ever. "I didn't make you do anything, Vanessa. You made your own choices." Click. End of call. The one who got away. Caldwell knew the truth now. Claire had never needed to pull the trigger or hold the knife. She had pushed Vanessa just enough, fed her the right information, let the heartbreak fester, planted the seed. And then, when the time came, she had sat back and watched it all unfold. Vanessa was the weapon. Claire had simply aimed her in the right direction. But there was no evidence, no proof that Claire had orchestrated anything. She had played her role perfectly. Vanessa would serve time. The world would move on. And Claire Matthews, would walk free. Detective Caldwell stood outside the courthouse as Claire exited, a smile on her lips, a new life ahead of her. She saw him watching her and gave him a small nod. "Good work, Detective," she said. Caldwell didn't answer because he knew the truth. But sometimes the real criminals never get caught. If you've been captivated by this gripping story, don't forget to hit that like button, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with your friends. Your support helps us grow and reach more people, and it motivates us to bring you even more shocking true crime stories inspired by real-life infidelities. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new chapter in our thrilling investigations. Thank you for being part of our journey.